Imagine, imagine getting a phone call, that one that every parent just fears. The police telling you your daughter has been murdered, and then finding out that the prime suspect is her ex-boyfriend, and that he's claiming that he was manipulated by his new fiancée. I mean, it sounds like a plot from a Hollywood thriller. But for Alyssa Burkett's family, this was their reality, devastating reality. You asked us to take a deep dive into this case based on the Surlessly podcast, and it's a story that's just as heartbreaking as it is baffling.
Yeah. You know, what strikes me right away is how this case really just shatters any illusion of safety and normalcy that many of us kind of cling to. Here we have this young, hardworking single mom just trying to build a life for her daughter, suddenly caught in this web of deceit and violence. I think it forces us to confront this uncomfortable truth that even seemingly ordinary relationships can harbor these dark secrets.
Oh, absolutely. The podcast really paints this picture of Alyssa and Andrew's initial split as relatively amicable. They shared custody of their daughter Willowwen, and there was no indication at all of anything like this to come.
And I think that's really where the insidious nature of manipulation comes into play. Because the early stages of an abusive relationship are often characterized by charm and this facade of normalcy. The abuser might even appear really caring and attentive, slowly gaining the victim's trust before gradually exerting control. It's a really slow burn that can be very difficult to recognize from the outside.
Yeah, and that's exactly what makes this case so unsettling. Things really took a sinister turn when Andrew started dating Holly Elkins. On the surface, she seemed friendly towards Alyssa, even pretending to be supportive of the co-parenting. But beneath that kindness, this much darker motive was brewing.
Well, yeah, and Holly's desire for this traditional family, as described in the podcast, seems to have been a major factor. She wanted Alyssa completely out of the picture, and she saw Andrew's daughter Willowin as this obstacle to that goal. And this type of possessive jealousy, along with this sense of entitlement, can be really dangerous. It's chilling. And it's also important to remember that Holly's manipulation went beyond just words. Andrew began a campaign of harassment against Alyssa. It started with these seemingly petty acts, but escalated to some really disturbing behavior. He even planted drugs and a gun in her car, hoping to get her in trouble with the law and paint her as an unfit mother.
Oh yeah, this is a classic tactic used by abusers to discredit their victims and isolate them from their support systems. So by creating a false narrative, the abuser can manipulate others into believing their version of events. It further isolates the victim and makes it even harder for them to seek any help.
Yeah, and he even went as far as making false police reports against Alyssa, further adding to her stress and anxiety. And if that wasn't enough, he used a GPS tracker to monitor her every move. It's
Yeah.
terrifying to think about someone having that level of control over your life. And, stalking is a serious crime that often precedes violence. It's like this form of psychological warfare that's designed to instill fear and helplessness in the victim. The fact that Andrew went to such great lengths to track Alyssa's movements is a very clear indication of his intent to control and dominate her.
It makes you wonder, how did things escalate to this point?
Yeah.
From what we've heard, Alyssa and Andrew's relationship wasn't particularly volatile before Holly.
Right, and that's where I think this concept of coercive control comes in. It's this pattern of behavior that abusers use to gain power and control over their partners. It can involve a wide range of tactics, including isolation, intimidation, emotional abuse, economic control. In this case, Holly seems to have exerted a really powerful influence over Andrew and manipulating him into carrying out her really twisted plan.
It's mind-boggling that someone could be so calculating and manipulative. The podcast does delve into the psychological profiles of both Andrew and Holly, and that sheds some light on their motivations. Andrew, it seems, was susceptible to Holly's manipulation because of his own insecurities and desire for control.
Yeah, individuals with, narcissistic tendencies are often drawn to abusive relationships because they crave admiration and validation and may be very easily manipulated by someone who feeds their ego and reinforces their sense of superiority. Holly seems to have recognized and exploited Andrew's vulnerabilities, skillfully playing on his desire to be seen as a man, a protector.
And the fact that she encouraged him to even hire a private investigator to dig up dirt on Alyssa shows just how far she was willing to go to destroy Alyssa's reputation. It's a stark reminder that abusers will often stop at nothing to achieve their goals.
Well, and this type of behavior is often driven by a very deep-seated sense of inadequacy and this need to feel superior to others. By tearing down Alyssa, Holly was attempting to elevate her own status and validate her belief that she was the rightful partner for Andrew.
And this manipulation went beyond simply trying to win a custody battle. It eventually culminated in this horrific act of violence.
Right. The podcast details the events of the murder itself, which are particularly disturbing. Witnesses described seeing a black man commit the crime, which initially threw the police off because Andrew is white.
And this is where the story takes a shocking turn. The investigation revealed that Andrew had gone to these extreme lengths to disguise himself. He was using makeup and a wig to appear as a black man.
Yeah, the use of blackface as a disguise is not only deeply offensive, but also highlights the lengths to which Andrew was willing to go to avoid detection. It speaks to a level of premeditation and a disturbing disregard for the gravity of his actions.
It's almost unbelievable that he thought he could get away with such a blatant and offensive disguise, especially in this day and age. But as the investigation unfolded, it became clear that Andrew's plan was riddled with flaws.
Right, and that brings us to the crucial role of forensic evidence in this case. The police uncovered a wealth of incriminating evidence, including the getaway car, which was found parked rather suspiciously close to Andrew's house.
And inside the car, they found a fake beard with Andrew's DNA on it, along with traces of Alyssa's blood. It was a slam dunk for the prosecution.
This forensic evidence provided an undeniable link between Andrew and the crime scene. It shattered his alibi and revealed the true extent of his involvement. You know, it's a reminder that even the most carefully crafted plans can unravel when faced with the scrutiny of scientific analysis.
So, with the evidence mounting against him, what was Andrew's next move? Did he confess or did he maintain his innocence?
Well, that's where the story takes another really unexpected twist. Stay tuned as we delve into Andrew's confession, Holly's desperate attempts to evade capture, and the devastating impact this crime had on everyone involved. So Andrew, his initial reaction was to deny any involvement at all in Alyssa's murder. He insisted that he had absolutely no motive to harm her. He claimed that they had reached an amicable custody agreement over the phone.
But the police weren't buying it. They had already uncovered this mountain of evidence pointing directly at Andrew. So what happened next? Did the pressure finally get to him?
Well, that's where things take this really fascinating turn. For over a year, Andrew maintained his innocence, even as the evidence against him grew stronger and stronger. And then suddenly, he agreed to this plea deal and confessed to everything.
He admitted to buying the SUV, putting on the disguise, and carrying out the murder. It must have been a huge relief for Alyssa's family to finally hear him admit his guilt.
Oh, it was, but the confession came with a really shocking twist. Andrew claimed he didn't act alone. According to him, Holly was the mastermind behind the whole thing. He basically painted himself as a victim, manipulated by this cunning and ruthless woman.
So he was essentially saying he was under Holly's spell, that she somehow coerced him into murdering Alyssa.
Exactly. Andrew claimed that Holly was obsessed with having the perfect family, and that she saw Alyssa as this threat to her vision. He alleged that she just constantly belittled Alyssa, calling her names and telling Andrew that he needed to be a man and protect his daughter from her.
It's hard to believe that anyone could be so cold and calculating, especially towards a child's mother. Did Andrew provide any specific examples of Holly's manipulation?
He did. According to Andrew, Holly was just relentless in her campaign to get Alyssa out of the picture. She pressured him to hire a private investigator, hoping to find something, anything to use against Alyssa in court. She even physically planted the drugs and the gun in Alyssa's car.
That's absolutely chilling. It's like something out of a psychological thriller. But why would Andrew go along with such a twisted plan? Was he truly under Holly's control, or was he simply trying to shift the blame?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's impossible to know for sure what was going on in Andrew's mind. Some experts believe that he may have suffered from this form of coercive control, where an abuser uses manipulation and intimidation to dominate their partner. Others argue that Andrew was simply trying to save his own skin by portraying himself as the victim.
Certainly a complex and disturbing dynamic. And what about Holly? What was her reaction to Andrew's confession?
As soon as Andrew started talking, Holly vanished. She skipped town, leaving Andrew's mother behind. And she started this whole new life in Michigan with a new boyfriend, telling him nothing about her past.
Wow! Talk about running from your problems. But surely the police weren't going to let her get away with it.
Absolutely not. The authorities launched a nationwide manhunt for Holly, and she was eventually arrested in Miami when she returned from a vacation in the Dominican Republic.
So it seems like she was living this carefree life while Alyssa's family was left to grieve and pick up the pieces. Did she show any remorse at all for her actions?
Not at all. During her trial, Holly maintained her innocence, but the jury saw right through it. They deliberated for only 90 minutes before finding her guilty on all counts.
That's incredible. It seems like the evidence against her was overwhelming. What was her sentence?
Holly received 2 life sentences without the possibility of parole. A much harsher sentence than Andrew's.
That's a powerful statement from the justice system. It seems like they recognized Holly's role as the driving force behind this horrific crime.
Exactly. The judge and jury took into account the calculated and manipulative nature of Holly's actions, as well as her complete lack of remorse.
So in the end, both Andrew and Holly were held accountable for their actions. But that doesn't change the fact that a young woman lost her life and a little girl lost both her parents.
You're absolutely right. This case is a really stark reminder of the devastating impact of domestic violence. It's a tragedy that could have been prevented if the warning signs had been recognized and addressed.
And it raises so many questions about the nature of manipulation, the complexities of abusive relationships, and the responsibility we all have to speak up when we see something wrong.
Precisely. I think this case is a call to action for all of us to educate ourselves about the signs of abuse, to support victims, and to challenge the societal norms that allow these tragedies to occur.
It's been a truly eye-opening deep dive into this case. We've uncovered these shocking details, explored the psychology of manipulation, and witnessed the devastating consequences of unchecked abuse.
And as we reflect on this case, it's important to remember that we can all play a part in preventing future tragedies by learning to recognize the red flags, by supporting victims, and by promoting healthy relationships. We can create a world where stories like Alyssa's become less common.
It's hard to fathom the immense pain and loss that Alyssa's family went through. They not only lost a daughter and a mother, but they also had to navigate the complexities of the legal system while grappling with their grief.
Yeah, and the emotional toll on victims' families is often overlooked in these types of cases. They're left to pick up the pieces, raise children who've lost a parent, and face a world that's forever altered by this violence. It's a burden that no one should have to bear.
And in this case, Alyssa's daughter, Willow Ann, she was just a toddler when her mother was murdered. And she's going to grow up without either parent, forever marked by this tragedy.
It's a heartbreaking reminder of the ripple effects of domestic violence. Children are often the silent victims, and the trauma they experience can have really long-lasting consequences.
It's a sobering thought. What can we, as a society, do to better protect victims of domestic violence and prevent these tragedies from happening in the first place?
That's the question, isn't it? I think we need to start by really acknowledging the prevalence of domestic violence and recognizing that it can affect anyone, regardless of their age, race, gender, or socioeconomic status.
Education is key too, right? We need to teach young people about healthy relationships, consent, and the warning signs of abuse.
Absolutely. And we need to provide much better support for victims. That means ensuring access to safe housing, legal assistance, and mental health services. And it also means believing victims when they come forward and holding abusers accountable.
It's about creating a culture where victims feel empowered to speak out and know that they'll be supported and not judged or silenced.
Exactly. And we also need to challenge the societal norms that perpetuate domestic violence. That includes addressing things like gender inequality, promoting respectful communication, and challenging toxic masculinity.
This deep dive into Alyssa Burkett's case has been incredibly insightful, even though it's heartbreaking. It's exposed the dark underbelly of manipulation, the devastating consequences of unchecked abuse, and the urgent need for systemic change.
Yeah, and it's also highlighted the resilience of the human spirit. Despite the unimaginable pain that they've endured, Alyssa's family continues to fight for justice and to raise awareness about domestic violence. Their strength and determination are a testament to the enduring power of love and the importance of never giving up hope.
As we conclude this deep dive, it's essential to remember that we can all make a difference. By educating ourselves about the signs of abuse, supporting victims, and speaking out against violence, we can all contribute to a safer and more just world.
And as you move forward, consider this. How can you use your voice and your actions to advocate for change? How can you be a source of support for those affected by domestic violence? I think these are questions worth pondering and ones that really demand our attention and action.
If this deep dive has resonated with you and you want to explore more true crime and criminal psychology, be sure to check out the Surlessly podcast. Each episode offers a unique perspective of these really complex cases, and it leaves you with more questions than answers. It prompts you to really think critically about the world around you. Thanks for joining us on this journey of discovery. And remember, knowledge is power. Use it wisely.